Hi, Melissa. So
Good morning.
Hello.
it's great to see you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You
in
too.
our area, there's a
here
bunch of
comes,
a bunch
here
of
comes.
craft fairs and things for the holidays, and they all happened last weekend or this weekend. I mean, we're fully into the holiday season, no doubt.
Yeah.
Are we? Yeah.
Melissa,
Yeah.
what's your store so I know?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got this new version of Zoom, and I keep forgetting I have to go to those dots. Well-Read Moose.
Okay.
My name, sorry.
And where are you?
In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Oh, Coeur d'Alene.
Whee!
I'm from my family lives in Tico, Washington, not far
Yeah.
from
Well-Read Moose is a
There's
fantastic.
Cheryl.
Yeah.
I will rename so people have my first name as well.
Oh,
Yeah, good to see you,
Cheryl,
Vicki. Good to see you.
good to see you.
Vicki,
Cheryl,
so
thanks for
lots
that
of-
nice plug for Vicki that you on StoryBrand.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, she has done, I love everything she's done with Sibylline, and she and her authors have been to our bookshop on numerous occasions, and it plays very well in our demographic, where there tends to be women over 50, and that's her focus, those who've been ghosted by other publishers. So, and I'm excited to hear, Vicki, about your I just had Steve Wasserman talking about his memoir and essays, and it looks like you're coming out with one as well, which is very exciting.
Yes, I am. Well, that was such a magical time in the 80s and 90s in San Francisco Bay Area. I call it the heyday of small presses. And but it was also the heyday of independent bookstores in some ways. The partnerships and were just off the charts, and that's where the San Francisco Bay Area Book Festival came from, was from that energy between the bookseller and the all those small presses who were springing up. They gave us the personal computer off the peninsula, and all of us little entrepreneurs who are literary go, oh, I'll start a publishing company. Of course. And I wasn't the only one. There were like 50, other small presses. Nolo Press came out of that, Mercury House, just tons of small presses. And it was just a really fabulous time. So it's a story about the book industry at those times, but also kind of a sort of a celebration of the way we used to be in the industry, So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing it up. It's called
Was Vicki was City Lights an inspiration even back then?
Hold on, I'm getting a dog thing going.
The dog.
Heyday just turned 50, as did Grey Wolf. So
Yeah.
all these independents have really hung in there, which is wonderful.
Cheryl, you weren't at our. I'm the chairman of the board at Heyday, and were
I know.
you at our? You weren't at our event in Berkeley,
No,
were you?
I couldn't make it.
It
Yeah,
was kind of amazing. Yeah, there were 250
that's what
people.
Steve was saying. He said it was Malcolm was formidable still.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was all about Malcolm. Yeah, or not all of it, but largely about Malcolm. Yeah. Malcolm, the original founder and publisher of Heyday Books 50 years ago, famously said that if he had to write in squid ink on a piece of paper and fold an airplane and throw it out the window to distribute, he would do that. I always loved.
And sometimes that's required.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes.
Hi, Aggie.
Hi, guys.
So maybe we should get started.
Okay. George, what store are you from?
The Sly Fox Bookstore in Verdon, Illinois, south of Springfield.
Okay, very good. And Sandy, where are you from?
Stanton, Virginia, the Book Dragon.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's interesting, Vicki. I would say that Reimagine the Bookstore, which is the original conference, that came out of Praveen Madan and Kepler's, has over 500 members, and a majority of them, I think, are in the South. I think many of the bookstores and a lot of the people we get on Story Brand are from the South as well. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And nice to have a
larger
larger picture like that. Anyway, why don't we get started? So I want to introduce Vicki DeArmon, who is both a publisher, a bookseller, and a consultant in the book business, I guess is the best way of summing it up. You've probably read the bio in the email that I sent out repeatedly, annoying everyone. And I thought we could start by just Vicki talking about what she's doing right now, and then we could go back to her book selling days at Copperfield, which is, Vicki, I believe Copperfield is the largest bookstore in California.
Well,
It's 9. I mean, the largest chain. It's not, other than Barnes and Noble, obviously.
yeah, I don't know. I think Books Inc. might be in there too. I think they have 11 stores. So it's
Yeah. But anyway, why don't you
they're right
tell us a
there,
little about why don't you tell us a little about what you're doing now, and then we'll go back to the book selling days, which is fascinating as well
Well,
as we.
at the ripe old age of 62, I decided to start another publishing company.
Good for
The
you.
last, the last one I had started was when I was 25, and that was Foghorn Press. And I ran that for, let's say 13, 14 years before I sold it to Avalon, who later sold it to Hachette. And so it's sort of thrilling to see, books like California Camping and so on still on the bookshelves, and know that, that originated from, a little idea I had long ago to call up Tom Steentzer and have him start doing camping guides. So at the time, I was Foghorn was about guidebooks and sports books. And then, but I've always had an affinity, obviously, for literature and for memoir and all that. I sprung out of my MFA program to start Foghorn, never went back, but I've been writing this whole time. So we really noticed that women of a certain age, which is my age, are, not, I wouldn't say shunned, that's probably a strong word, but not really fostered by the book industry on the publishing side. And so what we noticed is that if we reached out to these women, that we were getting some really great books, and we were wanting those books to find their readers. And so we formed a publishing company. This time I did it with 3 other women, also of a certain age, and with really fabulous skill sets like rights and licensing, design, editorial, all that kind of thing that would be a mix with what I like to do, which is to manage and foresee where we're going. And we formed Sibylline Press. And so we've been in existence since August 22. We're publishing, we say we publish the brilliant work of women authors over 50. We have an 84-year-old author, and we have a 50-year-old author, and we have all in between. And these are fabulous books. Our distributors, Publishers Group West. So, we're under the Ingram umbrella for distribution. And we're having a lot of organic successes. Cheryl knows this. She often has our authors in for seminars or talks to her audiences. And let's see, last year, Kirkus Reviews named one of our books to the top 100 indie books published. And this year we have 2 books in that slot. But I can't say which they are because we're bound to silence until December 13th. But it's like a nice little pat on the back that we're on the right track and things are being appreciated, really. So.
And then, Vicki, ebooks are an important part of what you're doing now, and you have a program where you're issuing a new book every week soon, right?
Yeah, because I can't just like do a small thing. I have to like climb a major mountain, and so this. So we're building our whole Sibylline Digital First program where, those books, should they succeed very well, will definitely be moving into the book trade and back and forth. So it provides a lot more fluid experience for publishers with how they can move their books around. But it also gets us a lot of ebook audiences for memoir fiction, and we've added romance because, our books aren't always about women over a certain age, but we do have a romance line for that group.
Wow. And then talk a little about your history in bookselling, along with Copperfield, the chain, the California chain Copperfield, and I was kind of fascinated by some of the programs you invented.
Well, one of the best things I ever did was to get the marketing and events director job at Copperfields. This was long after I'd sold my first company and my kids were a little bit older. And so I went, And Copperfield's, I don't know if you know, probably you do. They had at the time, I think, 7 stores. We built it to 8, and then now they have 9. And it's all in Sonoma, and there's some in Marin too, Cheryl, right? And then a few in Napa County. So I came in kind of and was shocked, I think. I was sort of stunned because I had come from a publishing world where I had been pitching bookstores relentlessly most of my life, right? And I was like, why don't they do this promotion, or why can't they do this? And then suddenly, as a bookseller, to have that vantage point of how besieged a bookseller is, by the day-to-day, by the onslaught of the amount of books, the number of publishers, the financial, things that must be overcome, working with all the publishers. It was an enlightening experience. And now I have a predilection for hiring people who've worked at bookstores, because I feel like that kind of knowledge is so central to publishing. And if we all knew how the bookstore worked, we would be much better publishers. So I feel, that's something that I learned while I was there. One of the things, just as a difference, a point of difference, like I think at Foghorn, we had like a 16% marketing budget, right? So to sell and promote books. When I went into the bookstore environment, there was no marketing budget except for what we could accrue from publishers. And it was like a 1 to 2% budget, which bore out as I saw the surveys and everything like that. So what booksellers do with a 1 to 2% marketing budget is vital, right? Because those are the funds. And so the first thing I did was to develop a budget with those funds and have Paul Jaffe sign off on it. And then I systematically went at, our displays, our events. And I don't think I knew at the time that I was building something, but I was trying to build sort of a system in which the bookstore could rest in knowing, like, here's a change in its displays. Here's what we do every Christmas. Here's what we do during this season. Here's how we do events. Like I couldn't honestly bear to do one-off events, especially like for debut authors. So it was like, okay, can we do a debut series at the local, pub where we bring in, a debut author every month and one. And then I turn to the publishers, I say, I have 3 slots, let's fill them. Boom, boom, boom. So, working the event grids and all this kind of thing. It was just such an amazing education. And I was never a frontline bookseller, to be truthful, but I was, I was training booksellers on events, and we were bringing events into all the stores, and we were doing a ton of offsites. I mean, the mileage that I have at the end of my life for a number of events will probably, be like 3,000, because there's just so many events that have, that I've coordinated and done. And some of them were, Ann Patchett at the Luther Burbank Center, and some were offsites like that, and some were just these debut authors, but they were all sort of with that idea. When I did events, I was thinking about how event centers do events. And I was thinking about how I could do a program, just like the Wells Fargo Center for the Arts issues this program of all their lineup. I could issue that same lineup for our fall books and put in all these authors and give it to people, and they could read it like you would read your college catalog picking out your classes. You would say, I want to do this, I want to do that. And they could sort of, shop it ahead of time and sign up. And so I wanted to create that excitement in the environment of, the areas the 3 counties I was working in. And I think we did. And so what it did was it elevated Copperfield's event program to a national program. And suddenly, because Book Passage was getting all those main authors, and Copperfield's really wasn't for many years. And so finally we started getting those authors, and because we had a program, we had a basket to put them in. And we could sort of say, here's the level of promotion. So there was a lot of marketing and dollars that I spent, either on advertising or in partnerships to build those event programs. So I'm not sure if events are of interest to people, but
Well,
events are
what was
staple.
interesting, Vicky, about what you did is when my wife and I moved from New York to Sonoma County, and we started going to Copperfield events. You had Trevor Noah like 5 years ago or something. And
Yeah.
so we go to the Luther Burbank Center, which holds what, 500 people or more? I don't know how many, it's big.
Oh, it
Uh,
holds up to 1,000.
Up to 1,000, and it's full. There's Trevor Noah. And so it's feeling like a big, splashy event, like for the New Yorker or something. And then in the front, in the lobby, that big lobby, is this scruffy bookstore. It felt scruffy to me because I came from New York, right? That put on the event, selling books in the lobby, and I thought it was extraordinary.
Yeah, that Trevor Noah was after my time, but it was totally that legacy of those big events and so on. I mean, you could put Ann Patchett came there, David Sedaris, all the usual big
Yeah.
ones and you just put them up there on the marquee and you have, a big energy event. But for
How
me,
much? Can I ask you a question? How much at Copperfield, if you know the answer or want to disclose it, how much of their revenue then came from events and big events like that? Because normally single bookstores think about selling books through author events, or at least doing their branding, which I think is probably more important. But you were getting huge audiences that paid to enter. So how much of that contributed to the success of Copperfield's?
well, I mean, it contributes on the dollar level for sure in terms of volume of books. I mean, I'm sure Paul was very happy with every big event we did where we sold, 500 books in a night. I mean, that is something that can make or break a month for sure. But it also went beyond that because it extended Copperfield's reputation across the country. So when we went to New York, at the trade shows, and we met with people and we said, here's our event program. Suddenly there was something to be proud of and to promote, that it created an energy that we could get more authors. So it was a statement, I think, to start doing those big events and to roll them out that way.
And one of the things that Lisa and I have been advocating is, since bookstore owners are, stretched thin, is to use existing methodology for publicity and marketing. So a lot of what we focused on at one point was on newsletters and trying to get bookstores to use their newsletters in new ways, innovative ways to bring in foot traffic to the store, but also to use events to differentiate them somehow. So you're not just another store, big store or a small store that's doing Ann Patchett or whoever it is. And not that there's anything wrong with that. And so I'm curious about that, is what the philosophy was about using events, even in the store.
I've always thought events were a great marketing strategy for all the reasons previously stated, because it builds the reputation of the entity throwing them. But yeah, I think, depending on the size of the store, it's not like maybe, if I worked for a store that only had one store, it would look differently. They had 9 stores, so there was already some sort of, purchasing clout, and they were, the big 5 publishers were interested in how Copperfield was buying and what they were doing and all that kind of thing. So they had a stake a little bit, I would say. Now, in a single bookstore, I mean, I think the opportunity still exists, but I think it also exists like maybe what Cheryl's doing, where she creates, a type of event that she does every season. And, and people are looking for that event. And she's known for, I'm bringing in women authors. She's known for that. So how do you establish, that same sort of recognition in your own community, maybe based on not as high profile authors? And that's a challenge, but I think there's a uniqueness to the event. And sometimes it's a combination of, adding food, adding an offsite location, or there's something else. Like right now I'm thinking about, like, for my authors, I'd like to put them on a road and do like my authors never like this, but I'm always joking, an old lady tour. It would be the women over 50 traveling with their books. And man, why don't I grab L'Oreal and, bring them in as a sponsor, and, everybody gets a little, makeover, whatever they get while they're there. I don't know. It's like,
what if you got a free signed book if you brought your cat?
oh, there you go. Just what we need is 30 cats in the bookstore.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely make the evening news.
Yes, it would. But like we're doing an event in New England. We have a new author. She wrote a book called After Happily Ever, and it's the story of Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White, hitting age 50, and now they're a little like, I don't want to do the princess thing anymore. I want to, start a business. I want to run a nonprofit. I want to do what I want to do. So I'm bringing the author in dressed in her princess regalia, and she's going to do princesses in rebellion parties, and everyone there will get a tiara for their, announced rebellion, and we will have cupcakes. And this idea is really taking hold in New England. I'm getting calls from New England bookstores like, oh, we want to do that. And so, I think that's it. Just the thing that I missed when I came back into the book industry, into the publishing side of the book industry, was a little bit of that, because COVID had wiped us out with events, right? Is like that little innovation thing. Like, or is anybody willing to take a little bit of risk and do something a little bit different? And so, I always like to push that, but and different bookstores like it or don't like it. And some of them have their own programs, and you have to fit, carefully within that. And
But but Vicki, when you were running events at Copperfields, you were talking to me earlier before we got on a couple of days ago about the grid that you kept, about the schedule, and that I love the idea that you established, the third Friday is whatever, is Bring Your Cat Day or whatever, is debut authors, and the fact that you even did that regularly at pubs or bars. On a regular cadence. It's the cadence that I think really makes it's the same thing with newsletters. A newsletter should come out, on the first Monday at 9 a.m. or not at all. It's like because you start to build muscle memory about this bookstore is going to be letting me know what's going on, and it's differentiating and different too.
I absolutely agree. I think the consistency really is like the thing. It's got to be like your religion. Honestly, you got to keep doing the thing. I always say we got to keep doing the thing, even if nobody comes, because they're hearing about it, they're learning about it, they're going to come eventually. And, we always think, oh gosh, I had 8 people in the dang store, but no, your newsletter went out, and, 50 other people heard about that event and got something from it. So, the event audience is always bigger than the people sitting in the room.
Yeah.
So, and that's an important thing to realize. But I do think, I used to, these were all my own deadlines that I set up. Okay, our newsletter goes out here. We get all the slides up on the website for the new authors. This happens here. The displays go out here. Maybe there was an ad in the Bohemian or something that has to happen at a certain time. And I made sure that happened. And then when we switched the displays, we switched it all and we did it again. And so running up against your own deadlines and pushing yourself that way, sometimes you just get exhausted and you're thinking, I would like a little bit more from all this. But I think it's an accrued goodwill and an accrued marketing sense that people know you're reliable and you're going to keep doing these things. And so at some point they're going to pop in, or at some point they're going to make a move in your direction, or they're going to understand your bookstore better. So, or when you make an appeal to them, they'll have some relationship with you. So I believe in that. Yeah.
What's interesting is that Copperfield's, because they had multiple stores and therefore a larger budget and more resources, could have you concentrate on being essentially the traffic cop, the project manager, the supervisor. So what you said is really interesting to me, that you were as much charged as curating cadences, bringing scheduling to everything that the store did, whereas somebody like, say, Brad down in Morgan Hill, he and his wife, I think, are the only ones pretty much there. So they've got to do it as part, but you can do it. I mean, I do it as the board chair of Heyday. I spend more time organizing meetings than I do, actually, doing anything about policy or finance. And so what's fascinating about bookstores is there is sort of a whole project management science to it that is supporting the whole developing the character of the bookstore and its specialness and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, Brad, you have your cadence already established, but, essentially when I walked into Copperfield's, um, I don't want to say that there was no structure, but, there was no structure. So, so it's just somebody like myself, it's like, oh, I get to build it. And I love that. So, if you do have an employee who likes to build structure, you can give them, some rope to do that, and then they will. But, I think, it depends on the environment and what's needed, but I have always enjoyed putting in place a system, and and then it's always contingent on, who follows you. So, does Copperfield still follow that rigorous schedule? It does not, but it does have a very, viable events program today. And, I had to laugh. I was trying to book one of my authors up in their Healdsburg store, and Jamie, who's so fabulous, is their events coordinator, said, or events director now, she says, oh, we have this great event up there where we match an author with a winery, and, and it's next door. And I said, oh, yeah, that sounds great. And then I hung up and I kind of chuckled. I said, yeah, I invented that event. But I was
In
like,
Healdsburg.
yeah, but because it's a perfect Healdsburg event. But what I'm saying is, like, some of it lives on and some of it doesn't. They take what they want and they go. So
What did you do? One of the things that Lisa's, and Lisa, you might want to dive in, but really good at is display and in turns, developing turns in a store, more frequent turns and stuff. What did you get involved in some in-store display and deciding about stuff that tied into events and things like that?
I saw that as part of my role as the marketing director, and so I actually had a display schedule for the whole year, and learning the language of other department stores, planograms, and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really, uh, I don't think I understood fully what they were doing, but I mean, I definitely had, like, here's a table and we're going to flip this with this display. And here's my, I'm going to do a collection on Edelweiss for those titles. I'm going to call in those publishers to help underwrite it. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to flip that table. Maybe it's once a month. Usually and so, that we're on environmental themes. And I think just that little bit, you probably all have this already figured out, but to me, it was like a little like, aha, a whole bookstore can change based on one table changing if it's at the front of the store, right? So you can sort of leave the rest, but if that one has that freshness, people have that idea that they're coming into something new all the time. So that's what I was trying to create there, was this sense that the store was changing and had something new to offer all the time.
Lisa, do you have any questions along that line?
Well, kind of, I had a question a minute ago. Cheryl or Vicki, you've been on in so many perspectives in this, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about collaboration and partnership. You were talking about coming up with event ideas and with that kind of thing. What sort of vision has emerged for you as you've been in these different roles throughout your career, as to what does great collaboration and partnership look like?
Collaboration is the theme. Thank you, Lisa, because that is the thing that this is how 1 + 1 = 10, right? Every time. So if you can get, like I'll remember back in the day at Foghorn, I did, we had a Girl Scouts who, were looking for their badges and who had their little cookies, and we had a camping book. So we went to all the independent booksellers and said, you let our girls come in and do a front window for you. And the best window will get a month's supply of Girl Scout cookies, which we'll pay for. And the best window for the Girl Scouts will get a trip, which will pay for their camping trip. And so we had these fabulous displays in independent bookstores, probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 bookstores participated. And there we are in the front of store in March with our California camping book. So that was a collaboration, a creative one. The other, and I think that could be even done on on a store by store basis. But collaborations are even happening, like when I worked at CALIBA, this idea of how we do a holiday catalog and the way that bookstores bring that catalog in, and then the way that they promote. And then, I was going to KQED and I was taking out ads in the New York Times for California so that all those booksellers had a page during this promotion. So I was looking for ways to up the visibility of all the participating bookstores. So it's just, once you have enough people in, and I did this I outlined this in my book as one of the incidents. Like long ago when I was at Foghorn, it was like, we are a small travel press. All across the country, there's, 50 small travel presses. You go to New York and they're doing a big party, a big 5 publisher doing a huge party for, Anne Rice's new vampire book, right? This is back in the day, so I'm dating myself. So how do we compete at that level? So we do it by collaboration. So all of those independent publishers threw in $300. We rented one of the ferry boats, and we got everybody on board and had a big party on there during the ABA, the American Booksellers Association show. And so, and then we all had our books there and had a high visibility, and we did media around it. And those were coveted tickets at the ABA. So it was like, I can't do it myself. How can I do it with other people? I think bookstores have this inclination because you already belong to ABA and you have that, like, how do we work together kind of thing, but you're also in your regional space. So how do you make it work for your community? And so, like Cheryl, you have relationships with I can't remember the name of the women's group, but where you do presentations there, right? So that's that community outreach. Maybe you could say a minute about it.
Sure. The Sausalito Women's Club, also the Sausalito Center for the Arts. We also collaborate and partner with local libraries, Mill Valley, as well as the Sausalito Library. And we're, so people know, a very, very small bookshop on the waterfront. We've got a really big view, but very little space. And we're right on the marina, right on the bay. But I can only accommodate comfortably 60 people sitting down in my bookstore. So if I want to do a bigger event, it's impossible for me to compete with Elaine at Book Passage, bless her. But she has a corner on that market and the really big name authors. Now, I do get Rebecca Solnit, and I do get, and if I know it's going to be a large group, I go to Sausalito Center for the Arts. Or I go to one of these. We don't have any large venues in Sausalito. That's the other problem. So even the biggest is a restaurant, Spinnaker Banquet Space, for 200, and that's jammed. I had Isabel Allende there. So it is more challenging when you don't have a lot of space in your own store to host these big events, and you've got other like Copperfields and Book Passage who have a 30-year legacy with the publishers and are attached at the hip. And of course, the publisher is going to give them, Annie Lamott or whomever. But I am making inroads in getting bigger name authors. And this is where I've had to really reimagine my bookstores, getting very creative with marketing. Events are invaluable because they drive foot traffic, as you know. They bring people into their store. There's impulse buying. They buy the author's books. But Vicki's been an inspiration on what she's done at Copperfield's. And I think, I would say ditto to everything she says about how important events are. I do a monthly newsletter, comes out the first week of every month, of 2,500 people on it. And coming up with clever themes has really been a big part of our success as well. For instance, in February, we will do something for Black History Month, but we'll do it at the Sausalito Center for the Art, where they will have Black artists on the wall as well. And it won't just be one Black author, but a lot of local Black authors in the Bay Area. And we'll have them signing, and they'll each speak for 5 minutes. So you have to be really, when you're small, you have to be mighty with your creative concepts and themes and doing that sort of thing. The Women's Club, obviously, we'll have Kristen Hanna, we'll have women's authors who've written about women's issues. We just did a perfume making workshop with Alka Josie and her Perfumist of Paris book. So, you don't sell as many books necessarily at an offsite like that unless it's a packaged, you pay to play to get into the event, and it includes a copy of a book. That's a good way to generate some income, but it is more challenging when you have one store, one independent bookstore, and not a lot of space. So
Yeah.
thank you for letting me share. And unfortunately, I have to go open that little bookstore on the waterfront. So I'm
Or
not
we can
gonna be
open
able to
late.
stay
It
in this
doesn't
call.
matter. You have to be very consistent about opening
Yeah,
hours.
Yeah, but
Oh.
yeah, we just had our 5-year anniversary. I opened 3 months before the pandemic. So we've survived. It
Yeah.
has been a labor of love, not easy. But
Congratulations.
I really appreciate and applaud everyone in this group because I think it's been an invaluable resource for the smaller independent booksellers like myself. So thanks to all of you, Steve and Lisa, for orchestrating this.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm curious if other people besides Cheryl and Vicki have examples of partnerships outside of their store. The Sausalito Women's Club, Cheryl, before you go, because I grew up in Sausalito. In fact, the library is where I went to the 5th and 6th grade.
Yes, it's
But
now
this,
City Hall,
or
the
4th and
library,
5th,
work and school.
yeah, the 4th and 5th grade. But the Sausalito Women's Club is the most powerful group in Sausalito by far.
It's quite a
You-
venerable organization. It's in a Julia Morgan beautiful clubhouse up in the hills in a residential area. We're limited to I think it's 300 members, and you have to be sponsored, and has a little bit of a white glove thing, but we have a scholarship that it all goes to women, and scholarship fund, Preservation Society. They do all sorts of, you can play bridge, you can go hiking. They have a book club, which I'm very active in. It's another great way to get people to come into the store. But they have a stage, they stage big musical productions, and it's a hoot.
yeah, I'll
It's a hoot,
say.
but they contribute a lot to the community. They really do. So yeah, it hasn't changed, Steve.
Thanks.
And
Yeah,
you're-
I'm curious if other bookstore owners have other examples of extended partnerships like that that have helped benefit them. Does anybody? Yeah, Stacy, go ahead.
So the American Mural Project is a giant mural in town in an old factory that I think they can seat up to about 300 people. And every few months I do an event with them. They brought in I'm blanking on his name, but the whistleblower cop from the NYPD wrote a book called An Inconvenient Cop. They brought him in. He's in the mural because it's a mural dedicated to the American worker. And in December, Sandra Boynton is going to be doing a musical review there. And so I'm the bookseller for those events. And it's a nice boost. It's basically a regular pop-up for us.
Great.
That's great. Anybody else?
I can speak to it. I work for CALIBA now. I'm the executive director, but I was at BookSync and was in charge of their YA events programming. So I have a lot of experience in events. And yes, BookSync is a large and has their large connections, like with City Arts and everything. But each of the stores is allowed to kind of create their own relationships with local, like, for example, the BookSync in Mountain View has a wine shop nearby on the same avenue. So it's a smaller and less author-oriented, but more community-oriented book club. And by small, I mean huge, in regards to a book club. But they partnered with this wine, I believe it's a restaurant and wine bar, is my understanding. And they do monthly book clubs there, and they get anywhere between 15 to 20 people. And they do pay for, like, they put in like $5 or something to like go towards the wine bar. And they do order drinks, and occasionally they invite the authors, but it's a really popular program that's probably been going on about 2 years for them. And that was started by the store manager there at the Mountain View location, Carrie. And then I personally, again, more of like a smaller, less author focused, but community focused event. I did a teen book club where we read the ARCs that we got, because I got so many ARCs. I was like, I can't read all of these. And so I partnered with the Burlingame Library. And originally it started by them coming into the store So the teen librarian would come, and she kind of used her connections to get the first group of teens in. And we met, and they basically reviewed arcs and got to go home with whatever they wanted to read. And they had to come back and just tell me what they thought of it, if it was age appropriate, you know, what they did or did not like, write review cards for the store. If they didn't like it, that was just as important. If they thought it wasn't age inappropriate, and then it was super low key. Like if they didn't read anything that week or that month, that's fine. Just come in and tell us about what you're reading at school or what you're watching. And it was really low key. And I did not get this. I did not come up with this idea. I got it at Children's Institute, and I can't remember who it was. But just an ARC book club for teens was really great. And I ran it for 5 years, right up until I left. And I had kids aging out, which was really exciting to see.
Isn't Booksync the store that did Not Your Mother's Book Club?
It is, and that's what I ran for 5 years. Yeah. And that was an event program, though. Yeah, for YA authors.
So did every one of the teens read a different book and then come back and report?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
it was
sounds super
more,
fun.
it wasn't a money maker. It was a community maker. And so, you know, sometimes the parents would come and pick up their kids and spend money in the store because they're waiting for their kids. But for the most part, it was just a safe space for teens to gather and spend an hour and talk to each other about books. And they really loved it. And I purposely made it really casual. Like I didn't want to assign them books. And then you got to start to see like, oh, teens are actually not interested in romance. Like even the, until they get to, until they're the 16-year-old girl, so to speak, and then they're interested in it. But a lot of times they're like, oh, it's the sci-fi adventure, but it had unbelievable romance, or that kind of thing. So it was really interesting. And it did build a lot of community and had people coming into the store pretty regularly.
I want to say something about this because this is so great. Hannah, the idea is, so if you're not Copperfield, you don't have 9 stores and you have the one store, it's like all it takes really is one legacy event that your store is known for. It's like, why do everything? Just do one legacy event and do it really well and do it continually and build that. But also when I'm ever thinking about events, I'm also thinking about media. Right. And that's a part we often leave on the table. We're all embroiled in the event and whatever. But, there's always that like local newspaper who could come and cover that and elevate that. So for me, it's always that tripod between you've got the library, you've got the bookstore, and now you've got the media part. So to not leave that on the table. And then we also have our trade media, because how much does shelf awareness want that picture? Or that photo or that video, where else can that go? So I just invite you to, just think how you could elevate it one more step with involving the media in any sort of legacy, and to really think about you're building a legacy event for your store.
I love that. I love that one legacy event, that idea. That's something that you can, and one legacy collaborative event. And I love the idea of one of the things that I'm pursuing locally is building around an independent publisher, building a market plan around an independent publisher where we can bypass some of the logistics, basically, look at some kind of partnership that allows for, hey, this is a marketing plan with events, with a legacy event even, or with some kind of thematic like you were doing with the camping, that we're going to store your books basically and do a long-term consignment or something. Have you ever thought much about the whole the mechanics, the logistics of this? I know you have, printing.
I spent a lot of time thinking about how can independent publishers partner better with independent bookstores, for sure. And I know, I attended a thing at Winter Institute about it. And I think, it's the usual, like, we'll buy our books and do this or do that, but it's really not. I've seen some pretty cool things where an independent bookstore might have a wall where they showcase an independent press every month. And certainly that independent press might have to have enough titles, to be showcased. It's a commitment. But it's also sort of like, since we're regional in concept bookstores, mostly, we might want to be thinking like, who's our partner publisher in my area? you know, or it's another California, who's a California publisher or something like that, where there's some alliances. But I think there, you know, just like what Cheryl and I have established now, okay, that's a go-to event. I know I can showcase 3 to 4 of my authors every spring in her store for a talk, and people will come. So, you know, how do we see past like the big 5 all the time who are just filling our stores with books? And so it takes a concerted effort. But in the old days, you know, I can still hear Nikki Salin of Cover to Cover in San Francisco. I don't know if you know of her, but you know, these small independent booksellers who are just so vocal and so dynamic and part of the industry, and they helped formulate that book festival and made it, you know, the way it was, and it was free to all these people, 35,000 people coming, and you know, and all the booksellers selling their stuff, and all the publishers and all that kind of thing. So I think the creativity, this is the work we have to do. And this is where I spend a lot of brain cell time thinking about this, like, how do I partner? And if you have 2,000 bookstores across the country, it's insurmountable. So how do I partner with local bookstores? Like, I just drove down to Del Mar. I'm in San Diego right now. I drove down to Del Mar to go into the, you know, the Diesel Books, which is now Camino Books, to check it out and to see, you know, okay. But what I see there, you know, I'm sure that there's small press titles in there, but I do see, you know, this sort of big representation of the big 5. And it's like, where is the small press? Where can the small press show up in a smaller bookstore? And
Yeah, because it's and I hate to use the word vibe, but there's a similar vibe between independent bookstores and independent publishers. It's the same struggle in a way.
Yeah.
And there should be many more partnerships like that, and not just partnerships that benefit the publisher, but also benefit the bookstore.
Yeah.
And so establishing, I like even your idea of the store that had a different display each month from a different independent bookstore is a great way to help both sides, I think.
Yeah.
It is. And even with, you know, there are a lot of hybrid models, hybrid nonprofit and for-profit models in the country today. And that's kind of an up and coming thing. And as you look at nonprofit kinds of work for bookstores that are, or bookshops that are pursuing that, certainly the independent press is a compelling differentiating factor, you know, for it's like if you're going to go into a nonprofit bookshop or a hybrid bookshop, or if you're going into a small bookshop, if you can see independent presses, you're basically seeing books that you're not going to find any other place a lot of times, you know, especially if you regionally focused. I love that idea.
Well, it does mix up the, you know, the offerings and makes it look, you know, not like every other store. So you're not looking like the airport store, certainly, if you've got independent presses there. But you know what's fascinating to me, and this is kind of where my mind has taken me on this, is, you know, you've got all these, you know, got Ann Patchett owning her own store, Louise Erdrich owning her own store, Richard Rousseau's, I think, daughter owns her own store. So there's this sort of thing going on where we're kind of cross-pollinating in a way that we haven't in the past. And I kind of wonder, you know, even, and then like Diesel Books, you know, is starting a little publishing program. And so, you know, what you'll find, I think, you know, as our readers, if you take the big universe of readers, out of those readers, you know, a third of them are probably writers or would-be writers. And same is true in bookstores, I think. You know, there's just a lot of writers in bookstores. So it's like, how do we take those, you know, you're a gathering place for writers. How do we, in some ways, provide an opportunity for writers through the bookstore that can directly link to a small press? So if I was your partner and you wanted to, you know, have a thing, you know, like an anthology or something like that from your readers, or some way that they submitted, or some contest or something that they would do that would actually lead to publication, how helpful and exciting would that be to your, you know, your customers coming in? So you know, those are the kinds of things that kind of get me going, is how do we actually not stay in our own boxes, but how do we either publish together or do other things together? And yeah.
You're right, and this is so connected. I want to follow this thread a bit, because as a bookshop owner, I mean, I'm at 581 local authors who have come in asking for, you know, help. and the 800-pound gorilla is eating them too, because the majority of them are like, well, how are you publishing? Well, I'm going to publish through Amazon.
Mhm.
I'm going to Amazon, I'm going to pay $3,000 and they're going to edit my book and get it out there. And I'm like, well, okay, first of all, your book isn't edited, but but the other part is that I can't access it as an independent bookstore, and it's hard for them to even understand that basic thing. And now it looks like Archway, Simon and Schuster, others are offering these self-publishing kind of packages for people. Have you seen? I mean, how does that play in the independent books, independent publisher space and the self-publishing space, and quality control or something?
Well, I don't want to have the arrogance to suggest that our model has taken on hold in the industry, but I'm seeing a lot of pop-ups, a lot of parallel constructions right now, which is that authors have resources and they want to use them for their own benefit. So this may be being taken advantage of in hybrid models. We're not a hybrid, we're a traditional publisher. But what you'll see now, I think at the Author Network, there's underwriting by authors to make that publishing company work. And it's really fostering and, that the authors have a say in the publishing company. That's how we operate at Sibylline as well. We actually invite our authors to put in money for the marketing of their books, but it's not part of the selection process. We're very rigorous on our selection process, but they should want to, because when they get to a big 5 publisher, they're going to be asked, oh, can you hire a $25,000 a year publicist? And that publicist may go this direction, and there's no guarantee. And what we always say is like, geez, if we put my money, Sibylline's money, and your money together, we have a war chest, and we're going to take the publishing mountain, right? In a way that small presses usually can't. That's why our authors, I just had an author complete a 12-day tour in New England. What small press does that? No, you know what I'm saying? You can't do that in a different way. So it's the resources, those authors, and how they want to spend them. But I don't like to send them on the hybrid model, because just like you say, Lisa, it's one that usually is about production and creating a book and then dropping them off, and like fend for yourself in the marketing world. And it's just not fair. It's not right. And that's how a lot of people end up with, 800 books in their garage. So, and it's sad. So I think there's got to be a different way. And, the publishing risk is one that the small presses are or I don't know if all small presses, but certainly we are predisposed to make. But I think the bookstore as an audience collector, as a fomenter of community, could definitely plug into that, and we could create something bigger. And so, as soon as we hang up here, I'll think what that is, or maybe you will. But we'll have to talk, because I think it's the next step. I think it's the next innovation, is like, how do we dance together? Because in the old days, we used to a little bit more. I feel like in the 80s and 90s, the bookstore and the publishers, we talked more. We were part of the same community more. And now I feel like it's a little more separated.
Talk about the 80s and 90s. Talk a little bit about that heyday, that time. Do a little bit of what you'd love to carry forward from that sweet period.
Well, I think, it may be tainted a little bit by my youth at the time, but there was an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think especially, in small presses, anybody outside of New York was making stuff up, how you published. And because of that, innovations were made. Because, how do you get a book to the market? Like I used to partner with KMBR on my sports books, and this is the major sports channel, to the point where Charlie Winton, our distributor over at PGW, said, geez, I can't turn on the radio, Vicki, without hearing about Foghorn Press. Because all of, and we were giving away books, and we were trading out advertising with books and all that kind of thing. So in the day, it was sort of like the Wild West. Well, we didn't have apps. Like, there's an app solution for everything right now, and there's a very crowded marketplace. Imagine my shock I'm selling 40,000 copies of California Camping every year in 1988. And then I get into this world and they tell me, oh, you can only sell 1,000 to 1,500 of your fiction. That's what you sell. And I said, really?
Yeah.
Why? And I have not solved the reason why. And I keep pushing against it with the promotion, but it's the crowded marketplace. It's that, for sure. So I think there was a spirit to the old days that was, we're kind of doing it all on our own and we need to band together. So there was a coming together of everyone to figure stuff out. And once we started talking to each other, inroads were made. And then we started getting cover stories in, Publishers Weekly about the Bay Area small press revolution and, featured stories about Nolo Press, Chronicle Books, all these amazing publishers that always had like the one book that was selling like crazy, like My California Camping. Not to say other books didn't come in instead and sell as well afterward. So it was a very heady time. It was like I could meet with the Costco buyer. I could meet with each bookseller. I could meet with REI on my own. And nowadays, it's like there's a protocol to get there, and you can't actually have a front seat with a lot of these buyers, or participate. You also, people in the day, you used to be able to buy a shelf, and you can't do that now. So it's like, okay, so there's different rules and there's different things, but it was like we were throwing everything against the wall. And I would say, 60% of it stuck, which is a good percentage.
And
So,
then Vicki, Vicki, I had a question for you because I know one of the things you did at Copperfield is develop an income program through partnerships, co-op partnerships with publishers, the big publishers. But I think now, and Lisa and some other people can correct it, I don't think those programs exist as much. But you were bringing in as much as 100,000 a year to Copperfield just through partnerships you did with publishers, right?
oh, it was co-op, yeah. Well, they used to have big programs then, and I think maybe they've been all decimated post-COVID and things. But I don't know how each of you. I mean, I would ask you, do you have a steady co-op fund, or is it something you have to apply for book by book?
I'll answer one thing. I know Books of Wonder, Peter Glassman is one of the co-op kings that I know of, that is still using it a lot, and strategically. We don't have him on this call, but there are a number of people who are teaching co-op and using co-op at least around the country. So,
well, when I say that Copperfield's 1% budget was marketing, it was all co-op. It wasn't, Copperfield.
The revenue was co-op, yeah.
The income for the money for marketing came from the publishers. And so, and there was a steady stream of it. And I don't think that's the way it is now. What I'm experiencing now with bookstores, like if I go to book an event, is and this is not personal to me, I'm saying if a publisher goes and tries to book an event, and a publisher my size, is a little resistance, like how many people are going to have there and how many can you guarantee will be there. And then there's also the ask oftentimes for some small stipend, $50 to $100 to cover costs, to defray costs. That didn't used to be a thing for small presses, I don't think. And we were doing a lot more events where, I think the cost of events has really come home to bookstores because you have to dedicate staff, you have to dedicate resources, you got to get the word out. And then, you end up with, 3 people in your store and you're like, why?
I'm interrupting. I'm so sorry, because I've got to catch a plane, but we're up in Seattle, headed back to Sebastopol. But I made you co-host, Lisa, so you can keep it going. I'm going to shut mine off shortly. I just wanted to say a couple things. One of which is we have Aggie Murch, who's one of Vicki's writers on the show over there. She's from England and living in England right now, but in Bolinas as well. And the other so hi, Aggie. And the other thing I wanted to say is that next month, I think we're trying to decide about the December event. Lisa and I are going to have the guy that runs Baldwin in New Orleans on, which is an extraordinary story that's basically branded around James Baldwin with a huge mural of him and a lot of his books and associated books. But finally, I really appreciate Vicki, you're spending your time. Lisa, if you want to keep talking, it's fine. You're co-host now. I'm going to sign off. I also recorded it, so I'm not sure what. I guess when you sign off, I've recorded it to the cloud, so it'll keep recording when I get off.
Okay,
But
well,
thank you so much.
Steve, and we're at our hour, so we're needing to wind up. Vicki, I could ask you questions all day long. Wonder if there are burning a group that we want to get in before we close.
I do have a question. Because going back to what you're talking about, using your local media, what if you don't have local media?
Well,
In a very rural area, there is no local paper.
right. So then you might be more dependent on social media,
Yeah.
outreach and things like that. Yeah, I think that, media's, also been picked over pretty good and wiped out. So it is difficult now. And there's an existence of, patch in all little towns, which will do like, at the very least, they'll do event announcements for you. So, I mean, I don't know how close you are to your biggest town or city.
We are a Connecticut towns are weird. We are a city within a town. Because Connecticut towns are basically townships, not actual towns, but like the nearest paper has covered us like once a year. There is no contact for sending press releases to. I post on our local Facebook groups when allowed, because they're very picky about who can post when you're talking about businesses, and you might get 2 likes. Like, people are not seeing these things. I'm building my email list. I'm trying to get the word out in all sorts of ways, but if there's no media, I'm considering radio ads even, but that's so expensive.
Well, radio, is it expensive? Is it
Like
have you checked it?
$300 a week for their special.
But what you might do with radio is, you don't have to do radio indefinitely. Sometimes radio stations will let you come on as a host, and then they'll share that cost with you. So you could propose like a book show or something like that, or you could do a radio ad. But I mean, it might be that you could kind of work yourself from the advertising side to the content side. And so let me just say this about small media. We have to do all their work for them. Like, you have to almost give them a finished article. You have to give them the picture fully captioned. And so I understand that there may be no media to do this, but the work of small media is that they don't have resources. And if you give them something ready-made, they're more likely to use it. So that's one thing. But I would, if radio is your only recourse, then I would actually go and possibly meet with the station and see how you could get content time, like a segment on someone's show, maybe where you come on and you talk about 3 books that week or 1 book that week or something like that. So move yourself from the ad side to the content side, and that'll give you, you have to work with what you've got. And radio is very viable. I did a radio show for somebody, and we only did it for 12 weeks, but it was canned, and then we had it for all time, right? And they replay it periodically. So sometimes they have little segments where you can buy into a show, like they do a noon thing, and they have different hosts. You can do that, but you don't have to commit to that for very long. Okay, here's $1,500. I'm going to do it for 2 months, lay it down, and then I'm out, and I'm going to see how that works. But you'll be surprised on radio how much time. Brad, did you have an experience with that?
Well, just a couple things. One, I just wanted to say thank you. Good to see you.
Yes.
And I wanted to tell Steve, thank you for keeping this rolling. But he's flying away. Social media is not about posting an ad or an event. Those things help, but it's really about content, making things that are interesting to the people that are getting it. And I find that when I do a post that has a picture of anybody local in it, does way better than any other thing I post about any author or any other thing coming. It's people just want to see your face, they want to hear what you have to say, all of those things. So that's important when you think of your social media, for it to be social, and not just advertising, because
I'll tie together, Brad, what you just said and what Vicki said in response to Stacy. I'm doing radio right now, and I started with a program called Check It Out as in collaboration with the library, and bringing on. And so they were doing a free, because that's a nonprofit. They were doing a content weekly with the librarian. She was over town, and then we started taking turns, and then it became my program. Now I do that, and I also do one called Life of Plenty, which they do free as a podcast. And so they put it up, but they also have the right to use that as content anywhere else. Used it to get advertising and to do other things. But I interview, Brad, a local person on Life of Plenty, and I say, tell me about the books that have shaped your life. And especially if we have a writer coming, or if we have, which is weekly, we have writers and poets. We often have writers and poets. Tell me about the books that shaped your life. And we will probably have them with another local person, because always having that local celebrity, that local person that is really important. And then the local person has a stream. But I've been able to get a lot of radio coverage on 3 of our local stations at our little town, all free. And so I appear on morning shows, bring a person from the community who wants to talk about the books they love. We have a little video that we do that called Books Are the Best Gifts. And we do that every Friday morning, and we highlight authors that are coming, and we do that. And that's another thing. So it's really interesting to find out where people are getting their media, and where do they know about stuff. And if that's
because like we've got like 7,000 followers on social media, but
heavens, that's awesome.
less than 10 interactions per post.
Yeah.
Well, that is misleading, because you don't always get likes and
Nobody
interaction.
likes, yeah. But also lately, we bring in fairly big authors for local authors, and then like one person shows up. So like,
you could do
there's
also.
gotta be a disconnect here.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what Brad's saying is, really true, is that people want to see themselves too. So I think there could be something. I mean, I'm seeing in my head here a thing where there's a word of mouth campaign that you start almost, and that, whoever comes and you're going to start, those author photos aren't going to go up unless they're next to somebody a reader. So you're going to have a wall where you're celebrating your readers, you're taking pictures of your readers, you're doing a lot more focusing on your readers on social media.
Mm-hmm.
That might kind of flip it for you. I don't know, but I mean, it's worth a brainstorm, because I think you're right. You're getting the feedback you're getting, so you need to shift it.
I would add, from my experience, and this was pre-pandemic and like kind of something that BookSync was phasing out because they didn't necessarily see a benefit. But again, they are in San Francisco. It's loud there. There's lots of competition. For maybe a smaller store, looking into groups, like one that's like really worked for us, I felt, was when I was putting up children's events, I looked at mom groups, so online groups of like parenting groups, or even these like online communities, and they often have calendars, and we would just copy and paste our event information onto these online calendars. And there were ones for like like Asian and Pacific Islanders of the Bay Area. So like, it could be something that's a little bit wide reaching but niche. Or it could be, you might have like a local online community that you're maybe not aware of that allows you to do calendar ads, or not even ads. They were free. You were just putting your event on their calendar, so their people were getting notified of it and saw it on there. So I would look into something like that. And along with radio, maybe there's a local podcast that I would talk to people and be like, are you listening to podcasts? Do we have any local ones? I think we, as an industry, kind of like to stick with the tradition, because that's what we're from, the traditional side. And so things are changing, and being like really creative with who you're marketing with. Even local coffee shops that do their own events, it might be nice to keep it local and small in that way.
We don't even have one of those.
Right.
So yeah.
But I mean, you're obviously creative, and you're thinking about different things, but to even invite the podcaster to podcast from the store, things like move things into the store that can be,
But, and do you ship, Stacy? Like,
Yeah.
do you ship nationwide? Yeah, I would also like always add that. Like, if you're not local, we ship
Oh yeah,
nationwide. You know,
I literally
Yeah.
put that on
I'm
literally
sure-
every
I'm sure you
post.
do. Yeah, every post. Yeah.
You're doing a
And
lot.
still people don't understand that they can order from us pre-order. Oh, I already pre-ordered it on Amazon.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't even know
Here's
why.
our pre-order wall. Look at all
Yes.
these things you can pre-order
Just
with
take a
us.
picture here, please. Get out.
Yeah.
It's a big world, and Vicki, you are so dynamic in it. I'm inspired and want to continue the conversation in many ways, like as an author, as a bookseller, as a collaborator, and I bet everybody on this call feels that way. So thank you for your time today and for joining us and kind of giving us. I'm glad that you were a part of the 80s and 90s, and I think it's really interesting. I believe that we're in the middle of a renaissance. I'm working on a book called The Future of Bookselling, kind of the sequel to Evan Friss's book, The History of Bookselling, and with Steve and Calvin Crosby said he would help too. So we're working on that, and I think I think you should be a part of that.
Yeah, a lot of my brain goes there for sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
I appreciate the opportunity to get my brain cells firing this morning. So thank you for all your great ideas and thoughts.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank everybody on the call. And anyway, we are considering, and those of you who are still on the call, December is a really busy month. Should we have our next StoryBrand, or should we jump into January because of where people are in Christmas? We're willing to do either one. Our next guest will be DJ Johnson of Baldwin and Company in New Orleans. He's up to do it in December if we want to, or to push into January. So since you're the last on the call, you can kind of weigh in.
If he has any thoughts about how to plan for your new year, I'd love to hear from him in December.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll Hannah, you think any thoughts?
I mean, we stop everything in December, but I'm not a bookseller anymore, so I'd let them speak to it.
Okay, well, I'll give that feedback to Steve. And Vicki, thank you again. This Zoom will be available for others and for sharing, and he'll trim it a bit, the two ends of it so that we get the meat of what you said. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa. That was
fabulous. I absolutely remember our conversation, all of it.
Yeah, the more I was talking, I was like, oh yeah, we talked.
Yeah, we talked, and I was about you, and so it's really neat to see you again and to do this, and I'm really working on this book, about pattern languages and all the things that we've been talking about, because we've got some radically different ideas. Steve and I named what we're doing beyond bookstores.
Yeah.
Initially, and met for 2 years weekly without really just really exploring the concepts of different things. And then we did a professional bookselling workshop, and that forced me to, instead of doing it in a Zoom format, I wrote it and had people read 20-page chapters and try things, and then we used the workshop to see how it went. But that forced me into writing a little bit and got me getting a lot of these ideas, especially around connectedness from publishing to storytelling and display, so that we're doing all the same thing, so that the media, it's not fragmented. It's like, I'm off here doing events, and I'm off here ordering books, and I'm off here doing displays. And
I love that. Where everything is sort of you're on the same road, and everything's accenting everything else. That's what we're all shooting for sure.
You've got me in so many different ways. I mean, I'm going to write you.
Great. Well, maybe our books can be promoted together. Mine's coming out in April.
Well,
you want me to send you? Are you going to Winter Institute? I can give you a copy there.
I am going, but I would love a copy or anything in between. Yours is it sounds going to be so fascinating.
Well, it's not really, it's a personal story. It's my story of coming of age in the book business in the 80s and 90s, you know, when I'm 25 years old to age 40, building this book publishing company. So there's a lot of the personal in it, but it really is a hallmark back to that, you know, day where sort of anything went. And it's
I
a
think,
story
I
too.
think there again, I mean, you know, that story is incredibly relevant today, because I think we are I often my first line of the book is that we're not selling books. That you know, if we're in that transactional space and that's what we're doing, we've lost, because there's an easier way, more convenient to do. But we are creating an experience, and we are creating community, and we are creating an experience of community, and a place of discovery, and we're doing a lot of things, you know. And
Absolutely.
and I think that's the anything goes of the 80s and 90s kind of come forward and saying, okay, let's really think about what business we're in. Those brick and mortar bookshops, which is where I spend all of my energies, is on the brick and mortar side. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
so we're
it's fascinating. It really is. So good for you. I'm anxious to see what is in the book and how you're approaching that. But yeah, you know, I think there's just so much thinking left to be done on it. And I think in some ways the booksellers are just sort of coming out of that, like, you know, that clenched space where they were in for so
right.
long. And
Well,
you know, come into the light, we're gonna do it again. But
well, the big concern that I have, you know, because I come from lean manufacturing and lean environments. So, and I say that the only business less likely to make a profit than a bookshop is probably a small manufacturer. So the margins are super slim, and we have today an 1,100 square foot bookshop that tomorrow, well, in January, will be a 2,500 square foot bookshop, but I have only about 7,500 titles in there, and 8,000, right? Actually, right now I'm more about like at 11,000. It's Christmas, but but I have more inventory cost in that little store than we have in our whole Franklin Fixtures factory, which
yeah.
is $8 million worth of business today.
Well,
And
this is the
if I
problem.
same inventory model, I would have been broke first year. I couldn't have survived. So
I say that all the time on the book side. It's like, you know, if we were just doing one widget, we'd be a lot richer. But every book is a new widget, and every book has its own, you know, assembly kit, and every book has its own marketing. And so, you know, once you move like that, the economies of scale are totally lost. So it's hard to scale as a small press unless, you know, like you remember the old days where they had the dolls. My girls all had them. And, you know, they had the dolls and they had the books and they, you know, and they were essentially scaling because everything was the same. But, you know, as a small press, if you're taking in, you know, all these books from different authors, you can't do it. And so it's like the biggest challenge. And I drive by all these warehouses where they've got their, you know, multi-million dollar setups. I'm thinking, how do you get from here to there? It's in publishing. It's much
right.
more difficult, much more, because of the path we're on.
Really, it's really hard. Well, we went through the Ingram Spark, or the Ingram POD facility, which is a brilliant space. I mean, and they have lean manufacturing. They have it down, and they're doing. Of course, they're printing for Amazon. They're printing for Ingram. They're printing for anybody. They're a print shop, and that
They're
was what.
printing for Amazon there?
Yeah, all
At
day
the,
long,
at the Ingram?
all day long.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
All printing on demand in big, you know, one title at a time kind of thing, you know, and which is the lean manufacturing model. My point, even with one widget, no manufacturing, I've worked a lot with auto manufacturing, and that no manufacturing company can survive with the inventory model that the bookshops are having to run with. It's fat, and the inventory has to be bought long before it's paid for. So looking at turns, and of course I'm looking at discovery spaces. So I'm thinking skimmer, dipper, diver. I'm thinking, most of the people who are coming in the bookshop say I'm not a reader. So they don't know what they're missing. They don't know what they're discovering. I'm not trying to split the same 10% of people who are reading in America. I'm trying to find new readers. And I can do that as easily with an independent press as I can with one of the big five. I can, if I'm really interested in them and I really am reading them and really understanding them, connecting them with a book on concrete architecture is, as meaningful as connecting them with one of Ann Patchett's new novels, so that's, and so I think there's something there for indie bookstores and indie presses in like a really strong partnership, also with this notion of really savvy marketing and display in store that is telling stories, that's rooted more deeply than, ooh, that's pretty and that's one table display. Every single shelf is a display. Otherwise, it's not there. So when we start,
it's so interesting. I wonder if you and I should try to partner in this way, because it's pretty innovative, and I haven't ever met anybody on the book selling side who has that same. I know you're way beyond the book selling side, but the book selling side also who has that same innovative streak on you in you to do something that would be different and that could be marketed. I mean, I said to the distributor, what I want is a Sibylline, the old lady shelf in every bookstore. Oh no, you're not big enough to do that. You can't do that. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, so, maybe a couple more years of branding on Sibylline Press and we can. But the fact is, until you can actually deliver that in a sort of marketing sense, not just in an inventory sense, that's what I'm trying to figure out. But it's like, your book here. I don't know, like there's one book that's blank, your book here, and then they take it out and they put their name in it and they're participating in something bigger. I don't know. But
there's a lot of, this is worth another conversation, because there is a lot of and it's connecting back with what Brad said too. I love the 50 plus woman, and for our bookshop, that is one of our personas.
Yeah.
So, and we're all about, and to Steve and I've been teaching people to use Chat GPT or whatever to know your bookshop's personas, know who your audience is and who you're trying to curate for and who you're trying to storytell with. And I also think that the whole bookshop should be a labyrinth experience. So if it's 2,500 square feet or less, it's not about department store thinking where you're going like boom, 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 boom. You want them to travel the whole place. I go to the aquarium, I'm going to see the whole aquarium.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to miss the butterfly garden or anything else, because it's going to just naturally lead me on a path. And when we think about storytelling as a store in your planogram, then and if 50 plus women are one of my demographics and they or one of my personas, I want that woman to be able to go on a journey of herself through the whole store.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I love that.
Books, I want her to see children's books that she wants to share with her grandchildren, or I want her to see children's books that she wants to gift to her best friend because they say a simple thing in a powerful way. If she's in outdoors, I want her to, so it's like really thinking that way. And we also do some things like what's Cookville reading, and feature local people and their favorite books and talking about them, and then do that in media anyway. But I'm wanting
Stacy could have totally benefited from that kind of thinking, having her readers
in the store. Yeah. Heyday, I've asked him about his John Muir collection, because that's the one that I'm also doing B2B partnerships. So I'm doing 11 B2B partnerships. So taking high interest books into special interest shops. So the camping books, our camping books, we have a couple, but our camping would go next door to the Cumberland Mountain Outdoor Store, where they are featuring several books that are connected to camping experiences and all of that. And so we're partnering with them. So the store and then other store. And so what I'm talking about with the John Muir collection from Heyday is like, I've got warehouse space. Don't print and put it in a garage or print and put it in a warehouse. Print and send it to me. Give me 120 days to sell it. I give you a marketing plan. I partner with this other local thing, and we've got something happening here, that is good for the press and good for the store. And we stop paying for all the trucks going, all the logistics, taking things back and forth. I don't want to return another book ever. I
Yeah,
want
it's painful. This whole returns business is painful.
painful, and it nobody wins but the trucking industry. I mean, you know, and we have too few people in the trucking industry, so we've got to solve the logistics problem. I only want what I know that I'm going to sell, and what I'm going to sell has a lot to do with the conversations I have, the stories I'm telling, and the way I'm positioning it. It's not happenstance. It really, you know, we have a game we play at our store. It's like, you can't sell this book. And so if a book's been lingering long, it's like, okay, here's the challenge. You can't sell this book. And it's like, yes, we can, if we tell the right story around it. And we put an hour on the clock. And in our small town, without a lot of foot traffic, it sells in an hour every time.
Yeah.
Because we make it prominent, we make it special, we add something with it, we add a little storyline, you know, the shelf talker that's just really scintillating and copy, and somebody walks in and they go, "Ooh, that's interesting," and within an hour it's gone.
Yeah, all the stuff that's just sitting there, just any sort of concerted attention is, I think, the thing. So,
And it's not, I mean, Lisa Gazashti at Brookline Booksmith and I have talked a lot about this and partnered on that. And during COVID, she became my thought partner, and she's brilliant. And but she built a whole expansion out of remainders and elevated them, and they were absolutely gorgeous. I just think there's a real opportunity, especially in the hybrid space and the nonprofit space, where we are not allowed to carry we're full nonprofit. So we can't carry the same books that are going to be in the airport, or we look too commercial to the IRS. So it's a great space to say, and we want to elevate the books that are from indie presses that are significant to our personas, that are significant to our audience. So whether that's local or whether that's something like the 50 plus women market, which is big for me. So
it's big for us for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, I'm getting pinged because I have a 10:30 and everybody's wondering where I am. But I want to continue the conversation. I'd like to send you a book. So if you want to just email me, I think we are on the same chain. I don't know. Just go ahead and send me your address and I'll shoot you out a copy. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I would love that. Can't wait.
And we'll talk more for sure. Thank you so much. This was great. Okay.
Bye-bye.